SpongeBob SquarePants Mysteries, Ooze in the Ocean. Chapter 7. I'll say one thing for traveling by ghostly teleportation. It's fast. Beats riding the crosstown bus at rush hour. We were back in good old Bikini Bottom quicker than you can say energy blasting pigtails. Seemed as though the Flying Dutchman had pretty good aim because my partner and I found ourselves just a few steps down the road from Schoolie and Fantason's house. A tall tower with its own elevator, rooftop garden, and jewel-encrusted toilet paper holders. Man, that joint was fancy on fancy with a side order of fancy. Luxurious. Opulent. Lavish. If you like that kind of thing, I prefer a plain pineapple, but that's just me. We were looking forward to getting inside grilling Fancy Son and seeing whether the Flying Dutchman's alibi checked out. Unfortunately, when we arrived, there was already plenty of action. Police action. And everybody knows cops and private eyes don't get along. They don't like us and we don't like them. That's just how it is. A Bikini Bottom Police Department boatmobile was parked right outside of Schoolie and Fancy Son's mansion. As SpongeBob and Patrick walked up to the skyscraping tower, they peered inside the squad car. No one was in it. Looks like the cops are already inside, SpongeBob observed. Maybe they beat us to the punch this time. I hope they left some for us. Patrick said, licking his lips. I'm thirsty. As an experienced detective, I've got a little history with the cops, SpongeBob said. Schoolie too, for that matter. Good thing I always carry these. He dug into the pocket of his trench coat and pulled out 2 fake mustaches and a pair of sunglasses. Here, he said, handing one of each to Patrick. Put these on. It's a disguise. Ooh, Patrick said, eagerly taking the mustache and sunglasses. This feels like real private eye stuff. Wearing their disguises, the 2 detectives walked up to the front door and rang the doorbell. It played the sound of a full symphony orchestra. The door opened and a police officer named Cheryl peered out. What do you want? She asked abruptly. Good afternoon, officer, SpongeBob said politely. We're here to see Schoolie and Fancy Son. Yeah, get in line, she said. Patrick looked around. I don't see any line. Rolling her eyes, Cheryl said, I mean, we're talking to Mr. Fancy Son right now, so you'll have to wait. What about? SpongeBob asked. None of your business, Cheryl snapped, starting to close the door, but then they heard William's voice behind her. Who is that? He asked. The press? I'd be happy to answer any reporter's questions. William always enjoyed seeing his name in the paper. He liked to think of his old rival from band class, Squidward, reading the paper and burning with jealousy over William's fame and achievements. SpongeBob saw an opportunity. Sure, he'd have to bend the truth a little, but sometimes detectives have to fib to get to the bottom of things. Mr. Fancy Son? He asked, trying to see around Cheryl. We're here from the Bikini Bottom Gazette. We'd love to ask you a couple of questions. Shoving his way past Cheryl and smoothing his monobrow, William said, Welcome, welcome! Come right into my fabulous home! He gestured for SpongeBob and Patrick to enter. Cheryl scowled. She strongly disapproved of reporters getting in the way of an official police investigation. Thanks, Mr. Fancy Son, SpongeBob said, stepping into the entryway. It had a shiny marble floor, a high ceiling, and walls lined with statues and paintings of Schoolie in heroic poses. It looked like a cross between a museum and a really fancy restaurant. Another cop stood inside glaring at SpongeBob and Patrick. His name was Bruce. What are those 2 doing in here? He asked in a gruff voice. Relax, officer, Schoolie said. They're from the Bikini Bottom Gazette. Just want to ask me a few questions. Oh yeah? Well, they can wait. Bruce declared. "We're not done getting your statement about the robbery." "Robbery?" Patrick asked. "What robbery?" Squilliam looked surprised. "My robbery. Of my house. Isn't that what you're here to interview me about?" Sure. SpongeBob assured him, improvising. "When my partner here says, 'What robbery?' that's just reporter talk for 'What about the robbery?'" Bruce got in between Squilliam and the new arrivals. "I said you're gonna have to wait." He put one hand on SpongeBob's shoulder and the other on Patrick's shoulder, turning them around and ushering them back toward the front door. "Outside, the two of you." But, SpongeBob sputtered. "Just a moment, Officer Bruce," Squilliam said, stopping the police officer. "There's no need for these honorable members of the press to wait outside." He tugged on a velvet rope hanging from the ceiling. There was no sound, but a butler instantly entered the room. "Yes, sir?" the butler inquired. "Cutterworth," Squidward said. "Please show these two gentlemen to parlor number 3. "Very good, sir," Cutterworth replied softly. "However, may I gently remind you that the chandelier in parlor number 3 is currently at the chandelier repair shop?" "It is?" Squilliam asked. "What for?" "It's being fitted with additional diamonds, sir," Cutterworth explained. "As I recall, your exact words were, 'This chandelier isn't sparkly enough. It needs more diamonds.'" "Ah, yes," Squilliam said. "Quite so. Fine then. Show them to parlor number 4. Oh, and once they're in there, fetch them some recent photos of me to go with their article." He looked at SpongeBob and Patrick. "It'll be on the front page, of course." "Naturally," SpongeBob said. Cutterworth inclined his head slightly. "Very good, sir." He turned to SpongeBob and Patrick, holding his arms stiffly at his sides. "If you two gentlemen will be so good as to follow me, please." With his chin held high and his face devoid of expression, the butler led the two detectives out of the entryway, down a long hall, down an even longer hall, and through a hand-carved mahogany door into parlor number 4. It was furnished with cushy sofas, velveteen pillows, thrones, more statues of Squilliam, and display cases full of souvenirs from all the exciting locations Squilliam had visited throughout the 7 seas. Cutterworth gestured toward a long couch covered in red leather. "Please sit down and make yourselves comfortable," he said. "Would you like any refreshments while you wait to speak with Mr. Fancyson?" Patrick and SpongeBob plopped down on the sofa. "I wouldn't mind a sparkling kelp juice if you've got it," SpongeBob said. "Thanks, Mr. Cutterworth." "I'll take a goober nut butter and jellyfish jelly sandwich," said Patrick. "And with a glass of punch if those cops left us any." Without another word, Cutterworth slipped silently out of the room, closing the door behind him. SpongeBob leaned over to Patrick. "Okay," he whispered. "We're reporters. Got it?" "Got it," Patrick said. After a moment, he said, "I thought we were detectives." "We are detectives," SpongeBob confirmed. "But right now we're pretending to be reporters." "I'd rather be a detective," Patrick pouted. "We are still detectives," SpongeBob said. "But when we asked Squilliam about last night, we're going to pretend we're reporters, since that's what he thinks we are. Are we on the same page?" Patrick looked down puzzled. Fancy people call this a page? In my family, we call it a couch." Cutterworth glided back into the parlor carrying a large gold tray. After setting the tray down on a side table, he served the refreshments. "Your sparkling kelp juice, sir," he said, handing a glass to SpongeBob. "Your goober nut butter and jellyfish jelly sandwich, sir," he said to Patrick as he handed him the sandwich on a plate. "And your glass of punch." "Thanks, Cutterworth," SpongeBob said after taking a sip. Delicious. Say, mind if we ask you a couple of questions?" "Not at all, sir," Cutterworth said, sitting at attention. "I am at your service." "Okay, first question," Patrick said. "Where do you get this goober nut butter? It's fantastic." Mr. Fancy's son chef makes it herself, the butler answered. An old family recipe, I understand. So I can't buy it at Bargain Mart? I'm afraid not, sir. Barnacles! SpongeBob finished his sparkling kelp juice and burped a small burp. Okay, anything unusual happened here last night, Connor? He looked puzzled. You mean besides the robbery, sir? That seems to have taken place early this morning. No, I mean a visit from the Flying Dutchman, SpongeBob said. Cutterworth nodded slowly. Oh, yes, of course. In all the excitement over the robbery, the Flying Dutchman's little surprise visit completely slipped my mind. SpongeBob exchanged a quick look with Patrick. So the Flying Dutchman was here! Indeed, Cutterworth said. He gave Mr. Fancyson quite a fright. Jumped out of the wardrobe in his bedroom howling. Mr. Fancyson screamed, and the Flying Dutchman laughed and disappeared. I suppose he enjoys frightening people. Most ghosts do. So the Flying Dutchman's alibi checks out, Patrick said to SpongeBob, who nodded in agreement. Alibi, sir? The butler asked. Never mind, Patrick said. He held up his empty plate and glass. Here, I'm done, all gone. Cutterworth took the dishes and carried them back to the gold tray. He picked up a folder from the tray and handed it to SpongeBob. Here are several photographs of Mr. Fancyson, Cutterworth explained. SpongeBob stared at the folder. Why would I want these? To accompany your article, the butler said, about the robbery. Oh, right, SpongeBob said, remembering that he was supposed to be a reporter. In the excitement of getting the information about the Flying Dutchman, that they'd come for, he'd forgotten about their cover story. Our article! Good! He drew the autographs out of the folder and flipped through them, pretending to pick the best one to go on the front page of the Bikini Bottom Gazette. Let's see. Cutterworth pointed to one of the photographs. I believe that one is Mr. Fancyson's favorite. He says it makes his monobrow look especially big and bushy. Right, SpongeBob said, holding onto the photo and putting the rest back into the folder. Thank you, Cutterworth. He handed the folder back to him. Say, what did the robbers steal from Schoolyum anyway? Only one item, but a valuable one, the butler answered. A fabulously rare abalone monobrow comb encrusted with rubies, sapphires, and emeralds. It's said to have been owned by King Athelfish the Hairy. Interesting, Patrick said, because he couldn't think of anything else to say. He didn't know what a monobrow comb was, and he never heard of King Athelfish the Hairy. He worried that a good detective would know exactly what the butler was talking about. And now, if you'll kindly excuse me, Cutterworth said, lifting the gold tray with both hands. I have a bit of tidying up to attend to. Patrick chuckled. Oh, I bet you do. It's pretty messy work making goober nut butter and jellyfish jelly sandwiches. At least when I make them, it is. The corners of Cutterworth's mouth lifted very slightly, almost as though he were smiling. Oh, not in the kitchen, sir. In the yard behind the mansion. Well, don't let us keep you, SpongeBob said, happy to have him leave so they could slip out of the house. Now that they knew the Flying Dutchman's alibi was solid, he was ready to go. But as the butler started out of the parlor, Patrick asked casually, So, what do you have to clean up outside, Cutterworth? Nothing too challenging, sir, he answered. Just a trail of glowing green ooze. Ooh! Stay tuned for Chapter 8, coming up soon.